I'm the bad guy. I'm the
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Across the Gridiron. I am Matt, and I am joined by the real MVP of the Super Bowl weekend, Mr. Eddie Equo. Eddie, it's done. It's gone. The Super Bowl 60 is in the bag. We are here to break it down, of course. But for now, how are you, my friend? How's your week been? How did you take in this entire Super Bowl weekend?
I wanted to break out in Spanish. Then I was trying to think about all the Spanish words that I could.
Bien.
and all I could think about was all out. I was like, isn't there any more? Come on, give me something more. And it was just all out. And that I was just coming back. So welcome to Across the Gridiron. I'm okay. I feel like, like you've been waiting for something for months and months, and then it finally comes, and now you don't know what to do with yourself. This is kind of, the space that I am in, and the Super Bowl has come, Bad Bunny did his thing, and all that kind of stuff. And boy, what a production that was. I thought I was watching like a movie. I thought I was watching like a movie. Now when he crashed down, okay, we're going to talk about the Super Bowl halftime, but
give the people what they want, Eddie. Give the people what they want. This is the Bad Bunny review episode of Across the Gridiron.
The Bad Bunny review. It was great. I enjoyed myself. Absolutely. Super Bowl, I did.
Well, the question I have for you is, did you stay awake for it? Be honest, how did you actually watch the Super Bowl?
Listen, so I was in here in my my office / studio / everything. Had the TV up, and I was kind of like, when you're just sort of, all I was doing was praying. I was like, I don't want like overtime, like because I'm already struggling as it was. So when the Seahawks were sort of like scoring the points at halftime, the Patriots hadn't scored anything. I was thinking, okay, this is going to be a blowout. So blowout means that it's going to finish quickly. Like no one's going to be hanging around. The other team just want to go back home and just sleep the nightmare off. So I was kind of holding that in one hand. And then, I have to say, I did kind of close my eyes a few times. So in the third quarter, I thought, let me just kind of, because the third quarter was a bit of a lull. There wasn't a lot going on in the third quarter. It was
just the third quarter. I think the whole 3 quarters of the game, but anyway.
No, I mean, there was some bit of scoring. There was a bit of some plays happening in the first half, but that third quarter, I was like, let's just. And so I think I kind of closed my eyes for a little bit, and then I opened my eyes again, and then it was like, okay, let's get it on. Fourth quarter, let's motor this thing. It's a Super Bowl, for crying out loud. And then, my boy May just started throwing picks. I was like, oh, goodness me, this is happening. And then Wosu, I was like, my Nigerian brother, right? Took one to the house, with so that was good. That was pretty good. No, I thought that trying to keep awake, for the Super Bowl is, honestly, I think we are. I don't want to, no disrespect to the American football fans, but I think for us in the UK, we put in the long hours, for the Super Bowl.
Well, yeah, and it sounded like you put in longer hours than me, because I was able to get to. So the game kicked off obviously in UK time at 11:30. I was watching it at home, just me. Wife and kids had gone to bed. It got towards the end of the second quarter, and I could feel my eyes going. And I was sitting on my settee, and all of a sudden I was like, "Oh!" And I think I missed like that, Gonzalez tip on the goal line.
Yeah.
Right? So I slept through that.
Wow.
I woke up as I think the third field goal was being kicked to make it 9-0, and I thought, right, yeah, no, need to get up. I need to get to bed. I can't do this. I was able to watch the Bad Bunny halftime show, which obviously we'll talk about. And then I thought I was going to have to try and watch it in the morning. So I came down like early-ish in the morning. Kids go to school early on a Monday anyway, so I was able to watch it for the last sort of half before I had my first work call at 10 o'clock in the morning. So I was able to get that all done. But yeah, it to be honest, I stayed up for the whole thing last year.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about the game, and we'll come on to it now. The first half, especially, it was, a great defensive performance by both teams. I think in that first half, the defense absolutely dominated, which we'll come on to. But it was a hard slog to watch. It wasn't an exciting and enthralling game. We had to wait to the fourth quarter till the teams we saw our first touchdown, and again, just to so from that standpoint, it was a fascinating watch, but it wasn't enthralling. It wasn't particularly exciting. So for someone who had been awake since 7 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday or whatever it was, to then stay up till 3 o'clock on Monday morning, that was never going to happen in the Matt Charles household. But look, let's move on to the game itself then. So look, the score finished. I mean, again, if you haven't seen it already, I'm sure you have. Because we're not going to be the one breaking this news to you if you're watching this, I'm sure. But the game finished Seattle Seahawks 29 and New England Patriots 13. So Seattle Seahawks are the 2025 Super Bowl champions. Fantastic defensive performance by them. And to be honest, I'm not going to say I called it correctly, because I called part of it correctly, but then I got the winner wrong. So, I'm not going to give myself too much credit. But what I did say throughout, I thought this would be a defensive game. And it's absolutely fair to say that this was a defensive masterclass by the Seattle Seahawks. The dark side, as we should call them. They've moved from the Legion of Boom, and then now the dark side. They absolutely terrorized the New England Patriots in that first half. Drake May, bless him, didn't know where he was coming or going. And that first half, they just could not get anything going. It was field goal, field goal, field goal. That's how it sort of went. And then the fourth quarter, things sort of ramped up a bit. We saw more turnovers. We saw a few touchdowns. 30 of the points in the whole game were scored in that fourth quarter, right? So that just gives you a feel for how the game went. But this really was, Eddie, an absolute defensive masterclass by the Seattle Seahawks, wasn't it?
It was. And you know what? I'm loving this whole dark side thing, because it just has like all this comic book kind of vibes. Like a DC like villain, coming out there and all of that. And it was a defensive performance where the defensive units were doing their jobs. Everybody was on it. It was a case of like, I think the Seattle Seahawks, I think in the first half, they probably had like maybe 2 out of 7 or so third down conversions. Nobody was giving anything up. The Patriots were blitzing, right from the very first couple of snaps. It was like, send the whole house, send the dogs, send everybody. This is the kind of football that we want to have today. And so it was slog. The yards were hard. Nobody was getting anything. No inch was being offered to anyone. And listen, the players that are on the field, they don't have, I know that for us who are watching, we want to be entertained, but for the players, this is real life. Like for them, it's about doing their jobs, reducing risk and trying to win, right? It's not about trying to entertain anyone. It's about how do we make sure that this is the Super Bowl? There is no other opportunity. It's a one and done thing, right? So I mean, those guys, the Seattle front line, the defensive front line, they were just getting juiced up. This was like, almost like the Incredible Hulk. Like the more they were getting angrier, the more they were like, doing damage, to the Patriots offensive line. I feel sorry for Will Campbell, the guy on the left hand side, because he was just getting absolutely pummeled, from time after time after time. Now, this sort of things can either make you resilient or it can actually just, so hopefully, he the amount of attention that he got. And listen, I don't think that he was necessarily the sole responsibility for this, because we talked about the Patriots offensive line. I mean, May was picking himself from the floor time and time and time again. Every time I looked up, he was on the floor. I'm sure he was probably thinking to himself, hey, listen, if I was going to be on the floor, I could have been at home in a nice, comfortable bed, not on this hard field. Every time I'm picking this up, literally, they flipped the script that I think May was the one seeing ghost. This is, kind of thing that, we're talking about Sam Darnold, his early days, about him seeing ghosts and all of that. It felt like May was the one was seeing ghosts. At some point, I genuinely felt sorry for him. I really did. I was like, look at this young pup, just getting to the Super Bowl, second season in the NFL, and you think that, oh, this NFL must be easy. My second season, I'm going all the way to the Super Bowl. And the NFL is like, not so fast, Skippy, not so fast. This is let's just remind you that this is the NFL. This is a hard place.
No, I think that's fair. I felt so that I think both things can be correct here. I thought that the Seahawks absolutely picked on the left side of the Patriots. They had sort of two rookies playing in that position, and it was clearly a weak link that Seattle just went and exposed, and time and time and time again they were putting pressure on Drake May. And we've talked about this, that we the easy route, or the easier route that the Pats had to the playoffs, but they've played two of the best defenses and beat two of the best defenses in the playoffs, in Denver and in Houston. But this was something else. And the thing is with Drake May, he just could not cope. Right, certainly in those first few quarters, he struggled. He just couldn't get a rhythm. And whereas, say, someone like Sam Darnold, who, let's be honest, he didn't have a spectacular game. If you look at his stats, they're fairly mediocre, right? And that's not a criticism, because he did exactly what he needed to do to win the game. But when the Pats were getting to him, he was releasing the ball, and he was still making passes.
Yeah.
There was a number of times when he was finding his man just as he was getting hit. Drake May just couldn't do that. He just couldn't. It took him a while to even get to show mobility in the pocket. And I think just by the end of it, when he got to the fourth quarter, he was trying to find things that weren't there, right? And there was let's come on to it now. That one of the biggest issue, or one of the biggest one of the bits that kind of put the final nail in the coffin, was that sort of pick that he gave, a big interception. Pass was never on in a million years, and that kind of almost saw the game out. But one of the things that I think really made a difference in this game overall was the number of turnovers. Now, in the Super Bowl, I think it's like 90% of the time that you win the turnover battle, you win the Super Bowl. And that's exactly what Seahawks did this Sunday.
Yeah, they did. And listen, if you don't give the ball to the other jersey, you stand a good chance, right? May just couldn't resist it, and I don't know whether that was a consequence of all the beating that he got in the first half. That at some point he just lost. It was just like, what, I'm just gonna fling it. right? I'm just gonna fling it and just hope that something happens. I mean, the one in the middle of the field. I mean, that guy was triple covered. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was just looking at it, I was like, where's he going with the ball? Like, who is he throwing it to? I had to look back. I was like, that is definitely Drake May, because I was still half asleep. Like, my eye was still like a bit foggy. I was like, is that Seahawks or is that so that was very curious. I mean, the other one that was a pick six, that took to the house. He just didn't see. He didn't see
No.
the run coming in.
No.
They were onto him like a flash, and so many times, like the Seahawks were running like there will always be a player running untouched. Like either just coming from the backfield or going around, completely untouched. I'm just like, how many people do they have on the pitch? Do they have more people? So that was coaching. That was coaching.
Mm-hmm.
That's scheming. That's kind of like putting your players in the most advantageous situation, to actually cause the most damage. Yeah, and basically they were just saying, listen, we believe our guys at the back, right? Because you don't
Mm-hmm.
send that many people up front if you don't have a lot of belief in your cornerback. And you're kind of looking at it and say, well, we've taken Stephon Diggs out of the game, right? Stephon Diggs hardly, I think he had like 3, targets or so in the whole Super Bowl, which you would have thought, Stephon Diggs would have, kind of featured a little bit more. I didn't even hear Bootie's name, at all,
No.
in the whole Super Bowl. So it's like, they basically took out their players and were like, okay, let's see what you can do, Drake May. Let's see you, make hay when you don't have, your regular guys going to you. And, of course, sometimes, this is where, the Seahawks did a much better job, right? Because everyone went into that game, it was JSN. It was all about JSN, your offensive player of the year. But you know what? It was Kenneth Walker. It was Kenneth
It was.
Walker, was the one doing the hard yard, was the one making hay, was the one making plays. So the Seahawks were like, hey, if you take away one weapon, we've got another one.
Yeah. I want to come on to Kenneth Walker in a bit. There's a couple bits I just want to do. We're still talking about Seattle defense. I think there's a couple of really interesting bits to talk about before we rightfully focus on Mr. MVP himself, right? And some of Seattle's attacking weapons. So you talk about, we didn't mention Booty. We didn't mention Stephon Diggs. Stephon Diggs, 3 receptions for a total of 37 yards. Booty, 1 reception for a total of 21 yards. Right. They are your playmakers.
Yeah.
And they just did not get them into the game at all. So that was obviously a clear reason why Seattle won. Now, we talk about interceptions, and I think this is a really interesting stat. Now, there's a couple of interesting stats I've seen on a Seattle sort of fan website. Now, so this therefore might not necessarily be true, but I think it's worth mentioning anyway. So we talk about turnovers. Now, I think in an earlier episode, I called out the fact that, do we trust Sam Darnold because of the number of interceptions that he's made over the course of the season? 16 times he was picked this season, one of the highest. But I did say, well, actually, he's actually gone the entire playoffs without getting picked. So the Seahawks are the first Super Bowl champions to go the entire postseason run without committing a single turnover.
Yeah, that is a true stat.
That is a true stat. So there we go. So that one is true. So I think that, again, that's just fascinating. They've protected the ball so well, so well, and the whole defense is being led by Mr. Mike McDonald. Fantastic coach, younger than both of us, which makes me feel incredibly old. But he was calling all the defensive plays, and I think that's the first time ever a head coach in the NFL has won a Super Bowl while calling defensive plays. Yeah. So he's done a fantastic job there. Yeah. And just one more on this. To the Seahawks, I find this one makes me laugh the most. The Seahawks defense had more sacks and more takeaways at the Levi Stadium this season than the 49ers did in all of their home games. Because the Seahawks have played there twice. They played, they've played them twice this season, but they had more sacks and more takeaways at that stadium than the 49ers did all season. That just shows their absolute dominance there. I love little stats like that.
That is just swag. That is just at the highest level. That is like, just putting the kibosh in. It's like, hey, listen, right? I come to your home. I go to your fridge. I take your food. I drink. I take your beer, and then I send you to the store to go get me some more. This is just, absolutely. Honestly, this Seattle Seahawks team, there is so much to admire, right? You're just talking about the coach there. And it really starts from the offseason. It starts from the decision that they made to go and get Sam Darnold. You could almost trace everything, back to that very decision, because Vikings had him. The Vikings had him. Sam Darnold was a Viking, won 14 games for the Viking. And the Seattle Seahawks were like, we'll have some of that. Gino, why don't you go to the Vegas, go try your hands on some blackjack and some casinos over there. While we'll take this, Sam Darnold. So it started in the offseason, and then they went around, just gathering talent, DeMarcus Lawrence, a couple of players here and there. And you're still kind of thinking, well, Seattle Seahawks, nothing going on there. And honestly, you talk about, what the Philadelphia Eagles have been able to do in terms of assembling, a Super Bowl team. And why I like this one, the Seattle Seahawks. Now, of course, not because I'm biased, about the Eagles, not about. But why I particularly like, what the Seattle Seahawks did was because they didn't go and get stars, right? No. DK Metcalf left the building, right? They moved on, from a lot of players that you would have thought would have been stars. And for me, that kind of in itself, might be another blueprint, right? There is something to be said about having the right environment in order to go and win the Super Bowl. And we're talking about it, off air, about the fact that the Seattle Seahawks didn't have any noise around them whatsoever. No noise whatsoever. They went on about their jobs. Nobody was talking about their players. Their players were not, in the news for anything whatsoever. There wasn't any kind of controversy coming out of, the locker room. There was no players, talking about they're not getting targets and all of that, not getting on the field. No contract, situations, nothing, none of all of those typical things that, you look at the teams like the Bengals, you look at the teams like the Ravens, you look at the teams like the Cowboys, all those non-football things, contracts here and there, players, you're going to pay this, you're going to do that. None of all of that. It was all about football, quietly doing your business.
No, absolutely. And I think that, we said, it was interesting when we obviously had Matt on last week. Matt the Pat, I think we should probably call him now, just to, create confusion. He was saying that he doesn't know a huge amount about Seattle because they haven't really been on TV, right? So they were picked for prime time 4 times this season. Patriots only picked 3 times, and that is less than the Chargers, than the Dolphins. And, it's crazy that the lack of exposure the team have in the public sector. And you and I, when we've done our picks and, towards the back end of the regular season, and we were asking who's your pick, for the Super Bowl as of today. And I don't think at any stage either of us said the Patriots or the Seahawks, because they've gone about their business really, really, really quietly, really calmly, really professionally. And I think the team element's a big part of that. And that leads us quite nicely on to Mr. MVP himself, Kenneth Walker III. So good they named him 3 times. Because he's stepped up as well. He wasn't necessarily the starting running back. It was only when I've forgotten his name now, their starting running back went down injured. He had to step up, and he's gone in. He's absolutely smashed it. He had more yards himself than the entire Patriots team, I think, for the first half, and he rightfully ended up with the MVP. And he is the first he's the first running back to win the MVP since 1997, which was won by Eddie. Do you know who it was? Who the last running back to win the MVP?
You want to tell me Emmett Smith?
I don't want to tell you Emmett Smith now. I want to tell you Terrell Davis.
Terrell Davis. Oh, okay. Davis.
1997 Super Bowl 32 for the Denver Broncos. That's it. Throwing more facts at you and right. Throwing them left and right here, Eddie.
Throwing them left and right,
throwing them left and right. But he was fantastic. He was absolutely fantastic. 135 yards, 27 carries, longest 30 yards, and he just set the tone. And they just the Patriots defended okay, but they just couldn't handle Kenneth Walker, could they?
Yeah, they couldn't. And when we're doing our preview and we're talking about, normally the MVP is always a quarterback. Mm-hmm. And I was saying that the path, for a non-quarterback to get to MVP is if it's one of those low scoring games, and then is one player, that is just, sparkling and is just, flashing. And he did that. He did that. He had like 94 yards by halftime. That's just absolutely crazy. And he was getting busy. And it was almost like he was softening the Patriots defense.
He was
because he was just pummeling them, absolutely pummeling them. And listen, their running back, Zach Charbonnet, who had an ACL, in the divisional round, and you're kind of thinking, right, okay, you lose your go-to running back, what are you going to do? And the thing is that, Kenneth Walker did have flashes, during the season. So it wasn't like, this was completely, new. The Seattle Seahawks knew what they had, right, in the player. So they knew they could trust him, at the biggest stage of them all. And boy, did he deliver. So proud of him, so happy for him. Being an MVP in a Super Bowl, it's a big, big deal. You're talking about, a game that has got, so many other players there. And to be one, of, was it 100 and something players? It's just absolutely fair play. Absolutely.
It's great. And I think it is great to see a non-quarterback win the award. And, I went on my rant last week and said the MVP shouldn't exist. MVP award for a whole season shouldn't exist. But I think it absolutely exists in individual games. And he was absolutely the right winner. And Wikipedia tells me he's an impending free agent as well. So,
wow, he's not going anywhere.
So he's put it this way: he's going to get paid somewhere, isn't he?
He's going to get paid.
He's going to get paid somewhere.
He's going to get paid somewhere. I mean, there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to be looking at him and say, "Hey, bring me some of that magic, over here."
Absolutely.
And what. I want to give credit to another part of the team, and I think that this is a part of the team that usually people don't talk about. People don't usually talk about them unless they're doing something wrong, and these are the kickers. The kickers and the special team. You got to give them some flowers.
Special player for special teams.
Special players. I mean, Myers hit like what record-breaking 5 field goals. And listen, you got to have a kicker. You've got to have a kicker, and I think what this Super Bowl, said to me was, hey, 3 points is 3 points. Like, don't sniff for 3 points. Remember, we're talking about this, about the Broncos, getting a chance to get 3 points in the championship round, and they sniffed at it. The Seahawks were like, we don't know what kind of game this is, but we'll take 3 points. And they were just taking 3 points, 3 points, 3 points, 3 points, until they broke the dam, and once that, all the scores started coming in. But by then they had stacked up enough 3 points that they were now sitting pretty, and the punts. Oh, we got to talk about the punts, right?
Mr. Dixon.
I know those things were a thing of beauty. Like he was kicking those things, and I was like, dude, like maybe he's been doing this all season, right? And we're talking about the fact that we don't watch a lot of the Seahawks games, and for me, I have to confess that I didn't pay a lot of attention to the Seahawks. Yeah, I probably watched them a couple of times, but they weren't playing the Cowboys, so it wasn't like, I was watching them that intensely. I mean, obviously I started paying attention, because obviously I love Sam Darnold, I love his story, and I've been talking about it, all the way through. So I started paying more attention to him, but I didn't think that, Dixon had that in him. I mean, he was clutch. He was setting the ball into the place that, honestly, a lot of the failed drives that the Patriots had was because of those punts. Like, if they weren't scoring field goals, they were kicking punts to make it so difficult for the Patriots, that the Patriots were handing the ball back to them.
Well, it really did. It really did sort of set them up for success. And I think the interesting thing is, let's go back to the kickers at the moment, certainly for the 3 points. You're right. Jason Myers, 5 out of 5, fantastic. And I think that what Seattle did well as an offense, as we said, look, Sam Darnold had a mediocre game from a stats perspective. But he didn't need to be. He had Ken Walker running down the throat. He was able to get those first downs, second downs. And when he got to the red zone, certainly in the first 3 quarters, they couldn't convert to a touchdown. Doesn't matter. We'll bring Jason Myers on, because you may as well just get the 3 points, because that shows you have enough confidence in your defense that you are going to, you're going to get the ball back. And that's exactly what happened. And when it comes to punting, you've got Michael Dixon's going to put it in such a good position. And then you've got defense that the Patriots aren't going to go anywhere. So yeah, Jason Meyer, 5 out of 5 in terms of his field goal attempts. The Patriots, on the other hand, Andreas Borgeles didn't even get on the field. He had 1 extra point. So that just shows that certainly until we got to the 4th quarter, we were able to get a couple of touchdowns, that they just couldn't get into a position. And I just think the Seahawks just get chipping away. It went from 3, 6, 9, 12. It was like, kick, then punt return, kick, then punt return. It was just relentless in that stage. It was just the defense kept absolutely drilling them, and it just, I think that just sums it up really nicely. And the importance of a good kicker has really been highlighted here, because yes, you can have an amazing defense, but if you don't have a kicker that's confident, and I say this with respect because I really love Sam Darnold's story as well. But if you have, say, like a Josh Allen as your quarterback, or a Patrick Mahomes or someone like that, you might end up going for a few more. You might get more of these 3rd down conversions. You might get more touchdowns, or you might risk it on a 4th down, which obviously we didn't see today. But yeah, it's brilliant. I think that just sums it up in every area of the park. Just Seahawks absolutely dominated the Patriots.
Yeah, and self-awareness is a very important thing. Understanding, what are your strengths and what your weaknesses are, and maybe if it was Josh Allen, right, he may have been trying to do too much, right? Maybe if it was Lamar Jackson, he may have been trying to do too much. But I think Sam Darnold understood He understood the assignment. He understood what brought them to the Super Bowl. It was about playing as a team, not being individuals. Although you have to say that to Kenneth Walker, who literally put the Super Bowl on his back. But, other than that, it was about, if we do our jobs, if Sam Darnold, you take care of the ball, as you've always done, don't go do something that you've not been doing, be yourself, take what the defense gives you, and just, if it's not there, throw it away, and a number of times, you could see the play wasn't there. He threw it away. But when he threw it, he was throwing it to a Seattle Seahawks player, no matter the condition. And I think that's immaculate self-awareness, and maturity, that has seen him now become a Super Bowl champion. And no matter what happens in his career, he can say, I've been to a Super Bowl and I've won it. And there's not a lot of players that can say that.
No, absolutely not. And fair play to him. He's deserved it for the belief that you show. And I think it's a fantastic story for other quarterbacks who it doesn't work out. High draft picks, it doesn't work out in the first season, second season, third season. That if you're in the right environment, it could still potentially work out. And that should give hope to some of the other quarterbacks we've seen, whether it's a Bryce Young or Zach Wilson or some of the other quarterbacks who just hasn't quite worked out for, that there is still time. If you have belief in yourself and you find an environment that works, and not be scared to go and be a backup for a season and go learn, like the way he did when he went to the 49ers to learn under Shanahan. So look, fair play to him. But look, I think let's leave the chat about the actual Super Bowl game there. I think what we'll do is we'll try and get Mr. Matejk, Matt the Pat. We'll try and get him back on to talk about the Patriots a bit more and talk about what's next for them, because this wasn't a humiliating loss, but it was a tough loss to take. So it'll be good to get Matt's version on that. But let's wrap up by talking about the halftime show. So Eddie, you already mentioned it. So the question I've got for you, Eddie. How did you find Kid Rock's halftime show? What was your favorite Bryce Young and Brantley Gilbert song? I mean, I've listened to Brantley Gilbert. Like, what was your favorite tune of that? What's your favorite part?
Listen,
waving your flag and your MAGA hat, and
it was all about the Bad Bunny. It was all about the Bad Bunny. Honestly, right? I felt like I was watching like a production of Grease. It had this sort of like, like when you watch Grease, you kind of, like there is, when he did that song Grease Lightning, where they were in the garage, and
oh my God. I'm interested to see where you're going with this. Carry on.
And like when he was in the garage, and then everything just changed, and it was like supercar, and he was hanging on the engine, and all of that, and all of those people were kind of like dancing, and they were like doing all the Grease song. Well, where was I going with that?
But, no idea.
But honestly, I had like this feel like I was watching like a cinematic production. You've got to say like the whole sort of heritage, sugar cane, all of that falling from a roof into the house, the hairdresser, the elderly people playing a bit of drafts, and stuff like that, handing his Grammy award to the young kid. Oh yeah, let's not forget Lady Gaga, hold on, right? We got to talk about this, right? Who was giving Lady Gaga this stylist, thing with her hair? Because honestly, I was like, I saw Lady Gaga, I was like, where's the elaborate hairdo? Where is the Gaga? This is like lady without the Gaga. Where is the Gaga? So that was a little bit of a downer, for me. Just seeing Lady Gaga without all of that. And then, of course, Ricky the man came out, to do his thing, belt it all out. I thought it was fun. I don't understand, people who've been criticizing, the halftime performance. I just thought halftime is just for entertainment. It's not to be anything else. It's just for you to just enjoy yourself, take it a little bit away from the game for a second and just enjoy it.
Well, yeah, I can understand why certain people didn't like it. It's a word that begins with R and it ends with ism. And it's the sort of people who might watch this podcast and will prefer me to you. Let's put it that way. Yeah. I mean, to be fair, I mean, I loved it too. I mean, in the UK, Bad Bunny isn't huge here in the UK.
No, it's not. Didn't even know him before he was
before wrestling. Yeah,
before wrestling, it was like a year ago that he showed up in wrestling. I was like, "Who's this guy? Like, what's he doing here?"
But obviously, we don't have a very strong Latin culture here in the UK. Where in America, it's huge. And what the whole as a show, I thought it was great. The production value on all these halftime shows is great. And the thing is, no matter who you have on, there are some people who are going to love the artist and some people who are going to not like the artist, right? Some people like Maroon 5 when they played. Some people didn't. Some people like The Weeknd. Some didn't. I loved, as I said last week, because it takes me back to my childhood. I loved Dr. Dre and Eminem when they came out. I thought that was amazing. Some people won't like that. Some people like the Nip Slip of Janet Jackson, which is obviously your halftime favorite. But the thing is, Super Bowl, it's an entertainment purpose. Yes, this is a Puerto Rican who sings in Spanish or raps in Spanish, so there are some people who don't going to understand that. But I generally don't see the problem with it, other than the fact that, I mean, is it just because the guy's Puerto Rican and which not properly American? And I think the funny thing for me is that you see all these right-wing commentators, nut jobs, knuckle draggers, whatever you want to call them, say it's not the halftime. The point of the halftime is to unite the country in entertainment. I'm sorry, it's not Bad Bunny's job to unite a country. If you want someone to unite the country, why don't you speak to the person in the White House? He's probably more important to do that than a rapper from Puerto Rico. So absolute nonsense. I thought it was great. It served it was an entertainment show. It served the purpose. It did a good job, I think, of not being overly political. There were a few political bits in there, of course, like giving a Grammy to the young kid who's detained by ICE, all this kind of stuff. But generally, it was great. It was entertaining, well produced. And anyone who didn't like it because of certain aspects of the performance, that says more about you than it does about Bad Bunny. And we here at Across the Gridiron stand with Bad Bunny and not Kid Rock.
We absolutely enjoyed it. It's for me like the Super Bowl halftime show, and maybe a lot of people don't appreciate it. For a lot of us fans that are not in the United States and outside of the US, the halftime show was probably the thing that brought us to the Super Bowl. Like, there's a lot of people that, didn't even know what the sports was, but they knew about the Super Bowl halftime show. And there were people that used to tune in just for the Super Bowl halftime show and then go to bed. That was it. Some people, and I'm sure like if you go and check on YouTube, the amount of searches for the Super Bowl halftime show would eclipse, the highlight of the actual Super Bowl game. There is no doubt about that, because it is entertainment. It's the reason why people, go to award shows and everyone is talking about the performances of the artists, at the award shows, because everybody wants to be entertained. You might forget who wins the Grammy, but if someone comes and performs at a Grammy, at an Oscar, or something like that, people tend to remember those performances. And so, especially the NFL, look, for the last couple of years, they've been expanding the NFL. I hear they're going to Australia next year. So you're going to Australia, you're coming to the UK, you're going to Brazil, you're going to Spain, you're going to Germany. You're trying to expand the sports globally, right? So, and the halftime show, I think, just helps to ease people into the sport. And if more people become fans, the better it is, for the NFL.
And if it wasn't for Janet Jackson's nipple, we would not be here today.
Exactly.
I think that's fair to say there. All right, then. Well, look, tell you what, we said before we jumped on, we'll try and keep this to no longer than 40 minutes. Of course, it's now 45 minutes. So, of course, we've overrun. But look, I think that'll be enough for today. Again, thanks to everyone for watching and listening, subscribing, and all that kind of fun stuff. It's been a fantastic season, Eddie. I've loved breaking it down with you every week. Until apart from the weeks we forgot or were too ill to do it. But we are not going anywhere. We're going to be back. We're still going to try and bring you as much content in the off season as we can. We've got a few special things lined up, like looking at how we did with our predictions, a few more fun things we're going to try and do over the course of the postseason. But Eddie, for the last time of the season, please take us home.
Yeah, and what a season it has been. 2 unexpected Super Bowl finalists, and 1 definitely unexpected Super Bowl winner, and definitely 1 unexpected MVP for the Super Bowl. I think this Super Bowl this year has been the year of unexpected. The Chiefs don't make the playoffs. No Josh Allen, no Lamar Jackson, none of the big hitters. It was almost like football was returned to just a simple, just everyday guy. It was just your everyday guy, not the superstars, not about the big guys. It was just about the everyday person, going out there and just playing football. And I think for me, that's the thing that I take out, the most, from this whole season. But more importantly, I do take out everyone that has been, part of this journey for us, the whole year, sticking with us, rocking with us, watching us. So I want to say a big, big thank you to all of you. And listen, Across the Gridiron is only just getting better, right? We're going to be back better, and we're going to do some off season, stuff as well. There's more Jerry Jones for us to rant about. See, I didn't even talk about a Cowboys stuff.
47 minutes. 47 minutes. 47
That's gonna
minutes.
be a record to say something about the Cowboys. But listen, guys, it's been a blast, and we'll see you at the next one, Across the Gridiron.
I'm the bad guy. I'm the